Okay, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Ann Meyer and I'm an office associate with OSU Extension Putnam County. Today's session is Extension Operations Autumn Finance Update and will be presented by Jesse Buxton from our OSU operations team. Just a little bit of housekeeping before we begin. The session is being recorded. Mics are muted. Each session is 60 minutes long. We will answer questions after the presentation, so please use the chat box for questions that you may have. And without further ado, I will turn the session over to Jesse.
Thank you, Ann. Good morning, everybody. Glad you all could join us early on a Monday morning. Hopefully, you've got some coffee so we can all get a little pep in our step through this fun fiscal conversation this morning. So let's go ahead and get started here. All right, so today we're going to talk about, spend the majority of the time talking about Workday and the impacts of Workday on some of the day-to-day stuff that we're doing in the finance realm. So those of you that may not have direct duties related to finance in your office, this should still apply to you in some ways. So it's all good information to have. Some of this you may have heard from other sources before. Maybe you were involved in the Workday session last week. I think they had one on Thursday with Jason Hedrick and some folks from the Central Enterprise Project team. So, but again, I think as much as we can reiterate some of this stuff as we head toward January, the better. And then along with that, we'll talk about some of the changes in local checking. Our new NelNet e-commerce platform. We'll highlight some of our newsletter items here that have come out recently, and then have a few minutes here at the end for some Q&A. Of course, feel free to type questions in the chat box, and we'll probably try to answer some of those as we go. Also, feel free to unmute yourselves at any time, or we can also save questions till the end. Either way is fine with me. So one of the big, I think, concerns on people's mind is when am I going to get trained for Workday, either for access or just to see what the system looks like, to know how to enter stuff. So over the last, I'd say 6 weeks or so, 2 months, the university's really been focusing on the training for the quote unquote core users in finance and HR. So these would be like our central fiscal officer team here in FAES, our HR representatives like Brian Dodrell. So we've been assigned a bunch of trainings in Buckeye Learn, and a few of them have been on live Zooms and that sort of thing. I'm still way behind on a lot of the training that's been assigned to me. I'll be the first to admit that. But for most of you, there won't be many, if any, assigned trainings to you in Buckeye Learn already, or live trainings that you may have to worry about scheduling on your calendar, that sort of thing. Most of the stuff that you're going to be involved in is going to be really self-paced and likely things that you go out and find on your own. On this enterprise project website, which hopefully you've all visited at some point so far, we've got an About Training tab where they talk about kind of general training for the general university audience, so faculty and staff, things that you may be interested in. 4 of the big ones that are on there would be the Workday Basics, which I think is a great one, just kind of introduce yourselves to the user interface. Requesting time off demonstration, that's going to be a change for us in Workday as e-leave is going away, and all the time off and timesheet stuff is being built into the Workday system. So there's a demonstration on how you would request a time off request. They have a training on the buying experience, which would include the new marketplace that's replacing eStores, spend authorizations, which would be requests for travel, for example, or requests for a purchase order, and then expense reports, which would be more like Pcard reallocation. Instead of entering an e-request for a Pcard transaction, you'd be entering an expense report. Same way with travel reimbursements, instead of doing the current travel reimbursement process we have with the attaching the logs and all that stuff, you would enter a direct expense report for that travel reimbursement. We anticipate having to supplement, some of the job aids and stuff that Workday is putting out there to provide a little more information specific to extension. I expect it'll probably take us, the first couple of months as we get into the system and familiarize ourselves with what some of the needs are there before we'll be able to generate some content for that. But do know that our operations team will be taking that on as a task as we get into the winter months to help supplement some of the information that's coming out from Workday. Now, you may end up having some trainings assigned to you in Buckeye Learn, so I think it'd be a good idea to check into buckeyelearn.osu.edu and click on your transcript and see if there's anything that's been assigned to you to take. Some of this may be based off of current access in eRequest, eTravel, eReports, PeopleSoft. So say if you are a travel initiator for your office, you may have had a course assigned to you that has something to do with the travel spend authorization process. So typically when I've been assigned stuff, I have been getting an email from Workday telling me that this is assigned. But some of the things have shown up on my transcript without any notice. So it might be a good idea to go ahead and take a look in there. If you see something in your transcript that you're like, I don't know why this is assigned to me, reach out to me, let me know. We can figure out if it's something you actually need to take or can just disregard. So I'd say the best thing to do is keep an eye out on the emails from Jason Hedrick. He's our Workday Enterprise Project Change Coordinator for Extension. So he's been sending out some emails every couple of weeks for the last couple months. I would expect to see more and more information come out from him over the next 2 months as we get ready to launch into Workday. Actually less than, about 2 months now, right? So always check the Enterprise Project website there for any updates. If you were in the session on Thursday, they did announce that the sandbox kind of test environment for Workday is live for everyone now. It's called the Lab Tenant. There will be a message, I believe, coming out from the Workday team university-wide this week, I think was their plan. By Thursday or Friday to send out an email to all faculty and staff to let them know that the lab tenant is available and you can go in there and create test transactions and familiarize yourself with the user interface and how you use the search functions and all those things. So I don't have the URL for that. I'm sure that will be listed either on the Enterprise Project website already or in that email that'll come out later this week. Another good resource is what they call the ARC, the Administrative Resource Center. This has a lot of job aids specific to Workday and how you enter different things in Workday. Also, not just Workday stuff. This ARC system is meant to be kind of a repository for all the assist pages, kind of the OCIO assist pages that have been around for years. This is kind of an updated version of that. So any of our software platforms will have resources available in the Administrative Resource Center. And I'll be sure that these slides get shared with everybody as well, so you don't have to worry about some of the hyperlinks I've put in here. So we've been talking about this for a while, obviously, but just to reiterate, Workday is the software platform that's kind of replacing a lot of the current financial softwares that we have. So PeopleSoft being the big one, PeopleSoft is our central financial software that handles the University General Ledger for the HR and finance side of things. So all that's being rolled up into Workday. The e-leave requests, so vacation, sick leave, and timesheets, the e-requests for all of the purchase type requests, e-travel, as well as e-reports. So all those functions are rolled up into one system now. We will still have some standalone systems like the advancement system that the University Foundation uses, the TAS system, will be its own standalone system where you can still run the gift memo reports on who's donated to your development funds or to your endowment funds. Of course, I think many of you may have heard by now that the 180-day hold on those development funds did go away. So, whenever you send a deposit to those development funds, now those current use development funds, it should show up on the GL the next month after the deposit. So you won't really need TAS to investigate what's in that 180-day hold anymore. But sometimes there's deposits that come through on your development funds that you still need to research who gave that gift, and so that's where you'll find that's in TAS. I believe the PI portal for OSP projects is still going to be a standalone system. So we can't roll up everything into Workday, but I know that we're greatly reducing the number of kind of ancillary software systems that we have out there.
Jesse, we have a question.
Annie asks, how long will we have access to old e-requests? I'm not sure. I mean, I know that like January 1st, it's not like it's going to get shut off. I think that search function, there won't be any ability to request new e-requests after sometime in late December. They're going to cut that off. There's going to be like a week or a week and a half kind of procurement blackout period while they get things switched into the new system. But my understanding is that that e-request will still be available to search at least for a few months. And then, that's really where all the receipt data and all that stuff that's loaded in there is the auditable record for Pcard transactions and personal reimbursements, and there's contracts in there and all sorts of stuff. So, they've got to maintain that database and search functionality somehow, whether that is in the current user interface or not. But for audit record, they have to keep that open for a while. Jennifer asked, same for old e-reports. That's my understanding as well, that the e-report system will be available in some fashion for a little while. I would say, just to be safe, I mean, again, I'm not anticipating on January 1st that you can't access e-reports anymore, but be sure that you've got all of your standard monthly reports printed off or saved, as a PDF or Excel files or whatever. I'm going to do that in late December, download a bunch of data for all extension, just to make sure I have all the detail activity data through December. All that stuff, available for our reporting needs. My understanding is they're going to kind of take away the hierarchy and have everything rolled up into these large reports for past data at some point. But again, I'm not sure if that's happening in January or February or sometime next year. But just to be safe, I would say, be sure you're up to date on getting your reports pulled, by the time December monthly reports come out, which would be that first week of January. So I think one of the things that's going to be the hardest for all of us that have been around for a while is just getting used to some of the new terminology in Workday. There's a lot of changes to the way that we refer to our various business practices. So, some of the big ones, chart field, org fund account as we know it is going away, being replaced with the foundational data model, or the FDM, and we use work tags instead of chart field segments. Many of them are similar, but like org, for example, becomes cost center. There's still a fund, but it's not quite the way we think of fund now. The account numbers we use, there's still accounts, but that's more like a fund, and the account is being replaced by a spend category. So again, I think it's going to take us a little bit of time to get used to those new terminology. Our e-requests are now spend authorizations. Reimbursements or payment requests are now expense reports. and our eStores platform becomes the marketplace, the Buckeye Buy marketplace. The approval structure changes for approving financial transactions in Workday is changing, and we've actually kind of prepared ourselves for this a little bit ahead of time because of COVID and some of the approval changes that business and finance pushed down to all the units. So as you are probably aware, back in March, April timeframe, business and finance removed the level 1 approval that we had for all of our county offices and replaced that with the fiscal officers for the units, and then made our senior fiscal officer, Terry Snoddy, the level 2 approval. So poor Terry Snoddy is actually approving every single e-request for everybody across the entire college. So I'm approving all of extensions e-requests, and then he's approving at level 2. So I'm the level 1 and he's the level 2. As we move into Workday, I'm not sure, if they're going to remove that fiscal officer or senior fiscal officer approval right away, or I haven't really heard, any discussion on that at this point. But the approval structure will be that the cost center manager, which is myself, will be the kind of level 1 approval. And then the unit leader would be the level 2 approval. For extension, our area leaders are going to be considered unit leaders as far as the security workflow goes. So we do have area leader approval on transactions over $2,500 or on a restricted spend category. So we currently have restricted commodities in purchasing, like aircraft, telephone service, postage meters. There's a list of about 24 or so restricted categories that require purchase orders dispatched by OSU purchasing. In the future state, if it's not a restricted spend category and under $2,500, it's only going to require level 1 approval for it to continue workflow through the system. So that's one nice thing. It's going to reduce that extra administrative task of having 2 approvals on all those transactions. Things like our eStores orders in the future, so our marketplace orders in Workday, those, when I approve them, will actually go directly to the supplier and the order will be placed. So unlike today's world where it requires the level 1 approval, the level 2 approval, and then the service center to release that order and dispatch it, it's just going to need my approval, and then boom, it's off to Staples or whoever. So these are some of the efficiencies that we're going to be gaining in this system. But I think that there's a lot of concern with our area leaders and even myself about what we'll do for getting local approval on transactions, and what sort of in the system functionality we may have, because my understanding is that like ad hoc approvals that we can do in e-requests now are going away. So I won't be able to per se ad hoc a local fiscal steward to approve a transaction in Workday. So we may have to rely on some out of the system approaches to getting local approval. But at the same time, we don't want to create more bottleneck and more administrative oversight than what Workday was really set up to accomplish. We want to maintain some of the efficiencies that are happening there. So we'll have to find a good balance, and we're not going to find that January 1st. I think it's going to take us a few months in Workday, kind of figure out how these workflows are happening. I've gotten a better idea of what kind of spend we're doing on different things, over the last few months, as I've seen all the e-requests now, which I really wasn't part of before. But we'll still have to figure all that out with how that level 1 approval fiscal steward role is going to work in the Workday world.
We have one question from Debbie there, Jesse.
Yes. Okay. So CCM is cost center manager. So again, cost center is the org number now. The cost center is the new org number. So your 570 orgs are going away. They're being replaced by a CC and then a sequence number, which I really wish that they had put some forethought into how they assigned these sequence numbers, because to me, they don't seem to make, any sense whatsoever, like chronologically or alphabetically or anything. So the cost center manager, as CFAES and most other unit or colleges in the university have kind of made this work, is that the fiscal officer assigned to that department is the cost center manager. So I'll be the cost center manager for all of our county extension cost centers, as well as our extension operations cost center. Robert Consitis, who's kind of my colleague within extension fiscal officer, he'll be the cost center manager for the extension administration, and then the state program areas, and Anna Bernard will be the cost center manager for 4-H.
Another question just came in too.
Yes, Suzanne. So this one's come up before. I know that there are several counties that do something similar. So a paper approval where an educator signs the request before it's submitted. So some sort of a pre-approval process with a form. I think we typically do this, especially for local checking account purchases, but you may also require it for Pcard purchases, and some people want it for everything. Again, I think we need to find the balance between what Workday wants us to do and what we feel like we need to do as far as local approval goes. So, whether that be a dollar limit, we say under this dollar limit, we don't really need to get pre-approval for this, that sort of thing. But again, it seems like our functionality to perform that digitally in the system is going to be limited. So, I personally don't like pushing paper back and forth a lot. So, so anything we can do to make it more of an automatic process, more digital process, I think is better. But it's going to be a wait and see how all that shakes out. So here's kind of an example of what our work tags in the foundational data model look like. So one of the big changes is that there's really only 2 companies now in the university structure instead of 3. We used to have 3, that business unit GL, when you're going into e-request and have to choose from the drop down, that BUGL, whether it's UNIV or OSERF or OSP or the Med Center. Well, now OSP is rolling into the Ohio State University company. So OSP and UNIV transactions are actually going to be less cumbersome to go between as they used to be, because they were on different business units. So now it's just really Ohio State University and the Med Center. So you have your company instead of the BUGL, you have your cost center instead of the org. The account, again, is really more like a fund. So we've always tried to get people to go away from using the word account to describe funds. And well, now we're kind of going a 180 on that. Projects, again, projects will not necessarily be required for every transaction. It's not a required work tag, but this would be, again, for mostly sponsored programs, projects, but there will be some other projects as well. The supplier, this is part of the work tag now. Instead of having the vendor ID separate, the supplier is built into the FDM. Your spend category is more like what your account was. So it's really describing, what the expense or the revenue is. And then the location will be another required FDM segment. And we will provide some translation tools for you all to be able to, know what your new cost center number is and what your fund numbers translate to, and sort of an old account code translation tool. I think as you get into the sandbox and play around with kind of submitting a request and how the FDM is set up, it's a lot less based off of just numbers. It's alphanumeric. So there are descriptors along with these things kind of built in. And like, as you choose a cost center, it's only going to give you the accounts that are available to that cost center. And you would either, kind of choose those from a drop-down menu, or you start just typing into that field and it pulls in the available values based off of your search. So I think I was a little concerned about this at first, being a data entry numbers guy for so long, being used to typing in and memorizing those numbers. I think we'll start memorizing these eventually, but there's a lot better functionality in Workday to pull those numbers in than what was really in eRequest or PeopleSoft before. So my big takeaway here is, be patient. Be patient with yourself, be patient with others, because in my humble opinion, as I put there, this is probably the most difficult part of the transition for us finance folks, is getting used to this transition from chart field to work tags, and really understanding how that impacts our inputs and then our outputs, like our reporting. It's going to take a little bit of time. And so, just be patient with yourselves. We're all starting fresh on square one here together. So, help your neighbor when they have a question, and we'll all get through it together. So moving on to some more specific procurement topics in the travel realm. So all the travel requests, as we know it now, request for a T number, which I don't know if that's what they're going to call it still in Workday. I haven't really heard if there's a T number associated, or if it's really just whatever spend authorization, sequence number gets put out there. But travel requests are now spend authorizations. So there still is a pre-approval requirement for travel as far as a spend authorization is concerned. And the reimbursements, which will be expense reports in Workday, that all that will be tied into the system, no separate travel system. There will still be a blanket spend authorization type functionality for our in-state mileage. So we still will be doing, monthly mileage reports, and can do that on a blanket fiscal year basis. We have to get away from the calendar years. I think Workday is really forcing this with travel because, from my understanding, the amount that we put on our spend authorization is going to be reflected as an encumbrance on our reports now. So before, you look at the 90 report and you can see your encumbrances there for payroll and for purchase orders, but that was really it. So now that the amount that we put on that blanket travel is going to have more of an impact on our reporting and available cash balance when we look at those reports. So it's important to request a fair number on the blanket travel requests, and then know that that'll help with our budgeting a little bit too, with that being listed as an encumbrance now. There's going to be a lot more emphasis, and this has been moving this way for a little while, but on the pre-approval side, especially for overnight travel, making sure that we have all of the documentation needed. And I think that Workday is going to help guide us with this a little bit more than what the e-travel system did, as far as making sure that we're using the contracted suppliers for our airfare and our rental cars and those things. And then, if we do request some personal time on a business trip, and making sure we have the flight comparisons ahead of time. If we're going to drive to a non-contiguous state instead of fly, making sure that we're showing that the cost to drive is lower, or pay or get reimbursed a maximum of what the airfare would have been, that sort of thing. So we'll be paying attention to that a lot on the pre-approval side. And one of the big changes is that reimbursements will now have to be submitted within 60 days instead of 90 days. So apparently we've been out of compliance with an IRS rule on this for some time anyway. And the university decided that they would wait for the travel policy to update as we got into Workday on this. So I think most of the time people are pretty quick about getting their reimbursements in. If they were having trouble getting it within 60 or 90 days, I think we'll still have folks that that's just not top on their mind. So we'll have to keep on reminding everybody about this because the big change is that somehow, I'm not sure the functionality of this, but it will be processed as a taxable income as opposed to a non-taxable reimbursement off cycle. So in essence, if you submit your travel expense report after 60 days from the time the expense occurred, which is my understanding, not just the end of the trip, it will get added to your paycheck kind of as taxable income, as opposed to just getting a separate reimbursement payment for that. So it does have a consequence, which it hasn't really before, other than slap on the wrist exception form. So on the purchasing side, so procurement side, again, this is something we've been gearing up for a while, it seems, but more emphasis on the contracted suppliers and using contracts for spend. So we will have eStores, as we know, it is going away. It's being replaced with this new marketplace platform. There will be supposedly more suppliers available. I think they've been working on trying to get some contracts ready for marketplace. But the big change is that instead of having to go out to individual supplier punch out sites, there will be kind of a single search functionality. So you can search in one place and it'll pull in stuff from those punch out supplier sites. So you would see things from, Staples, CDW, Lowe's, et cetera, all in one list instead of having to go out into those catalogs individually and search. Another thing I've heard, which is nice, is that once you have pulled in your cart and you're kind of going through the approval process, like if I have to push that request back to you for something, or maybe you started to check out and realized you forgot something and wanted to add it in, right now, once you return to e-request from eStores, that's it. If it doesn't get pushed at that point, you have to start that order over. My understanding is that won't be the case with the marketplace. You'll actually still be able to edit that cart and make changes up until the point that it's approved and processed. So that'll be nice. Save some time, hopefully. From also my understanding, we don't really have any delegated buyers in the service center anymore. So previously, if we were to request a purchase order that was under $5,000 and not on a restricted category, our service center could dispatch that purchase order directly. Now they'll still be inputting that requisition in Workday, but central purchasing is going to have the final review and dispatch on all POs. So I think that's going to again, if we're going to purchase something that is in competition with a contract that we have in the university that conflicts with the contract that we have, we'll be less likely to either get that vendor set up to begin with, or to be able to get that PO pushed through without some pushback from the university. So I think what they're really going for here is the path of least resistance is our contracts. We still only have a few key mandated required contracts, Staples, Coca-Cola for Columbus campus, our Xerox machines through ComDoc, that sort of thing. But I think it's going to be harder to get a PO pushed through for a non-contracted supplier without, a lot of extra hoops to jump through. So just be aware, and it's been moving that way for a little bit. I think we've all run into that situation at some point where we've gotten some pushback from vendor maintenance or from the service center or from purchasing on trying to put through an order that they thought we should have had a contracted supplier for. Competitive bids, are going to be more common as we move forward. They're going to really try to approve less waiver requests, and just the way that they can see the data in Workday, they're going to be able to tell, if there's a vendor that 40 or 50 counties are using, and individually we may only be spending a few $100s with them, but cumulatively we may be spending as an organization or as a college over the $25,000 for goods or $50,000 for services bid threshold. Purchasing is going to come back to us and say, we want to send this out for a competitive bid. This isn't all bad. If we have to send something out for bid, typically we're going to either get a better price or better terms and conditions associated with that contract. But it may slow down the process on some of our requests for renewal or something as we get into to another year. One of the ones that's top on my mind in regards to this is American Income Life Insurance. We've had a waiver for this from our local checking accounts for a while, but I don't know as we move into Workday if that's going to still be approved in the same fashion that it is now. So be thinking about that. If there's any that you're aware of that you feel like a lot of counties are probably using that isn't on a contract already, reach out to me. I'd like to kind of get a list of the ones we're thinking about to be as proactive about this approach as possible. So another nice feature is going to be the vendor self-service portal, or at least I think for the most part, that's going to be nice. Anybody that's had to deal with like state of Ohio vendors before, state of Ohio portal, you have to kind of maintain your own vendor profile. So we're kind of doing the same thing with Workday. So instead of sending a vendor setup form out to the vendor, they have to scan it back to us with all the signatures and all the attachments for their ACH information, that stuff. Then we have to go into the purchasing website and do the vendor maintenance request. Now we just send them a link and they'll create their own vendor profile, their own login information. Purchasing can work directly with them to resolve anything or to get updated taxpayer information, that sort of thing. But the downside to that is, we won't be the middleman in the process that knows when a vendor ID has been activated per se. So that may require more follow-up on our part if we have a purchase, in the works waiting on that vendor ID. We won't have that communication directly from purchasing on that. But I think all in all, that's a positive move. Pcard. Some of the biggest changes we're going to see are going to be with the Pcard program. So the big message here is that we have an increased responsibility on the Pcard manager. So as always, the card manager has the authority to deny the usage of the card, and card managers need to be comfortable with this authority. And I will always back up a card manager on that. If you have any questions or concerns, feel like somebody's using the card inappropriately, and I don't just mean like fraudulently or anything like that. I mean like, if they're pulling it out of your desk without signing it out, we need to take care of those internal control issues and address those. So please let me know if you have any concerns about that. But the big change for our card managers is going to be, you're going to be primarily responsible for kind of the reallocation of that card. I think some managers now typically enter a lot of the e-requests for your office for the purchases on your card. Other managers may have whoever made the purchase, enter that e-request. The expense reports, unless they're related to a travel, really need to be entered by the Pcard manager. So it's going to be like entering an e-request, but you're really doing the reallocation. So as the card manager, when a transaction is uploaded into Workday from PNC Bank, it's going to show up as a notification on your Workday inbox. So you'll see, okay, I have a new transaction that's come in. You'll create the expense report for that. I'll approve it. And at that time, it hits the general ledger. It's live data. It's there. The service center doesn't reallocate anything. It just goes directly to the FDM, the work tags that you put on that expense report. The service center will still be involved, but it's going to be post approval. So they're going to do the compliance review, looking for the receipts, if there was any sales tax, that sort of thing, after kind of post reallocation in a sense. I'm hoping that there'll be some reporting functionality for me to be able to help, follow up with card managers if something's not, if the expense report hasn't occurred, because this all still has to happen within the monthly cycle. We'll still have kind of a reallocation expense report deadline at the end of each month. But I think that it'll be a small change for you all because, again, you're already entering e-requests, so the expense report process shouldn't really be more cumbersome at all. But for those of you that have not been doing those e-requests yourself, that'll be a change. We're kind of having a conversation as a college about, who we should have in that card manager role. I think that generally speaking, we want to have, more office associates, office assistants, potentially even program staff in that manager role as opposed to educators, just because of the availability of the card and the ability to enter the expense reports and that sort of thing. So for some of you, we'll be having a conversation as we head toward January about best practice for who should be the manager in your office. Cycle limits will increase from 10,000 to 20,000. The transaction limit will remain the same at 5,000. I think this is happening automatically. We don't need to request this specifically. For our Univ cards, we're transitioning all these cards into Workday. You don't have to get new cards. You're not going to be issued a replacement card. So when we're in that procurement blackout period, even where we can't enter any e-requests, we should still be able to use the Pcard to make purchases during that time. And I think we should still try to limit that as much as possible for any issues that we have loading the data into Workday. But at least you'll have some option there for still making purchases while we're kind of blacked out for a week. And I'd expect anybody that is a Pcard manager to probably get some Workday training assigned to you in Buckeye Learn. So be on the lookout for that. I imagine that that'll be coming sometime in the next couple of weeks. For the OSP side of things, we will still not be able to use our normal department cards for OSP grant purchases. But OSP's Pcard program is changing. They're getting rid of their Amex cards, and they're going to be using basically the same PNC Visa cards that we're using now. So that's going to be a big change for those of you that have had Amex cards, because unlike before, where it was tied to a specific project and you just collected your receipts with your statement and sent that to OSP, now there's going to have to be expense reports entered for every transaction, just like the Univ P cards. But the nice thing is that those OSP P cards can be used for multiple grants and not just a specific project like they have been in the past. So if you're an office that has a few OSP projects, I would think some of the ones that come to mind: Lorain County, Hardin County, Cuyahoga County, Franklin County. You guys specifically tend to deal in a lot of projects. You can have a kind of quote unquote department OSP P card and use that for grant purchases across all those projects. So that'll be nice. But it will be a change on the OSP side. And those transactions will actually go directly to the OSP service center for the compliance review and kind of bypass our service center altogether. So really anything that involves an OSP purchase, they'll have a service center, kind of like our FAES service center, and Workday will workflow those transactions to them instead of ours. So that's another efficiency gain. Before, our service center still had to kind of touch everything, even though the OSP was doing the final stuff. Now it's kind of going directly to OSP and skipping over our service center. Jennifer said, so will the SNAP Ed person be the Pcard manager for their card? Jennifer, I don't know that for sure. I know Robert Consitis, being our fiscal officer with FCS, does a lot for the SNAP-Ed program, and he and Pat and the SNAP-Ed managers are kind of working through that conversation right now as to how the SNAP-Ed charges will be handled as we transition from Amex to the Visa card. So I know that they're going to be talking with all the SNAP-Ed folks about that soon. Presume offices will be able to have more than one card. Likely, Christina, again, we're going to take that on a case-by-case basis. We still have, Extension has the most cards of any unit in the university, and our college has the most cards of any college in the university. And so, we're still seen as that, that's still seen as a risk. So we have to try to, maintain, I think, as few cards as possible with still being able to do business. So, for some of our larger offices, having multiple cards does make sense. For smaller offices, not so much. So again, we'll take that as a case-by-case basis as those requests come. But yes, as far as having a OSP and a Univ Pcard, that's kind of how I anticipate that happening for a lot of offices. The card manager would be the same manager for both cards in many cases, except for the SNAP-Ed stuff. I think we'll still keep that kind of separate, but we'll see more and more of our revenue come through OSP in the future. So I think having a department card for offices that deal in OSP projects will be helpful. Suzanne says, do you prefer a travel manager in the office to submit reimbursement requests, or the individual completing their reimbursement? I think Workday is going to allow for a person to still do that on behalf of the traveler. My personal preference is that the traveler does it. I would rather have the traveler, do that than have that fall back on the office associate. But that's really a conversation for you, your area leader, and your staff to kind of go through together. There's no rule on how that needs to happen. But really, I think that's just a staffing personnel question that should be addressed there locally. All right, we only got about 10 minutes left here. I got a few more slides to get through, so I'll try to go through the last ones kind of quick. Workday Changes reporting. So this is still the big unknown for me. I know I have a training assigned to me that has to do with reporting that I haven't been able to get through yet. But I know that all of the data that comes into Workday is known as live data. So kind of as soon as a transaction is approved, it hits the GL and it can be reported on. So we don't have to wait on overnight processing of vouchers or end of month payroll things for OSP grants. Like, everything is going to be there as soon as it's approved in real time. So we can always report on information as soon as it occurs, which is going to be nice. What I don't know is what kind of the standard monthly reports are going to look like, if we're still going to have a cash balance sheet each month that we have to review and a detailed activity summary that we review, or if it's just kind of rolling throughout the fiscal year, or how that's all going to work. Also unsure if there's going to be better university guidance on reconciliation. Kind of right now we have our own extension process with the one pager that you print out to sign off as the reconciler, and you have your fiscal steward sign off as the reviewer. You have your kind of checklist of, here's the reports I printed out, made sure I didn't use someone else's money, made sure they didn't use my money. I'm personally hoping for some better guidance university-wide on what they expect to see out of a monthly reconciliation review of financial statements, but I have not heard anything to this point. Also kind of unsure on access. Before, as long as you did the IDPT, you could take that training and request e-reports access. Well, that may, it seems like a lot of the security roles are kind of tied to job titles and HR functions. So I don't know if the full suite of reports will be available to all of our office associates, or if it's something where I may have to download stuff and put it out in OneDrive for you guys. So I really don't know moving forward what full availability of reporting access looks like in Workday. So that's why I have the big question box there. There's still a lot of unknowns on the reports. Local checking accounts, I think we've said all along, local checking accounts are staying. We will still have to have local approval on those, but we'll probably have to get a waiver from business and finance to maintain that kind of outside of Workday. So I'm working on that process right now. We'll probably have to review our local checking account and Pcard restrictions list and make sure that we're in line with all the new policies as those become finalized in January, moving into Workday. We are moving or have been required to move to a monthly reporting process instead of the bi-yearly that we do now. So right now, Vicki Snyder collects your reconciliation sheet with your statement and checks the average cash balance over the last 6 months. So does that twice a year, and then once a year we do a journal entry to reflect that cash balance on the university general ledger. Now we're going to be doing that monthly, and so part of that is we're going to collect not just the cash balance, but your total receipts and disbursements each month as well. Along with that, I think something that will eventually help us with that reporting process is we're planning to implement a statewide consistent software platform for local checking account reconciliation and tracking. So some of you are using QuickBooks, Quicken, the Pegboard system. We're kind of all over the place, inconsistent. We've been over a several month long review with our OCIO software team. We've kind of identified a program called Xero as the best case. We're working through some bid waiver contract approval with that right now. It did pass its risk assessment with OCIO. So some of the nice features of this is it's all web-based. So there's no disk image that needs to be put on anybody's computer. As we have changeover in personnel, we can just reassign that file to or access to that to another person in the office. We don't have to get files pulled off of a computer onto another computer. We'll cover that cost centrally with our operations budget. We're hoping to have that approved as well. Plan is to pilot it with a couple of county, probably a dozen or 20 so counties this winter, probably in the Marchish timeframe, and then with the goal to have kind of a statewide rollout of this the beginning of next fiscal year, so in July. So just have that on your radar. If you are interested in being a pilot county, please email me. I have a few that emailed me after the session on Friday. So we'll have to probably strategically think about, who, I want to have people from each kind of area and spread out across the state kind of involved in this with varying levels of complexity for the kind of financials that they do internally in the county. So, but please let me know if you're interested in being part of the pilot, and I'll reach out to you, after the first of the year with some more information on how we're going to move forward with that. And then also, if you have any initial thoughts, questions, concerns about this move, let me know that as well, because I want to make sure that we're all, prepared and on the same page about, the expectation of what's going to happen. And this is kind of the first information rollout on this, and we'll have a lot more, as we get past Workday and then move into this second quarter of next year. NelNet, just briefly on NelNet, if you haven't heard about this yet, it is our e-commerce platform that the university rolled out. We worked hard to get a specific website set up for each county office a couple months ago in August, September timeframe. So each county office has a unique URL where somebody can go make a payment. It's a very flexible payment site where, somebody it can be for a registration, it can be for a publication, it can be for sales out the door, it can be for, really anything we need to collect credit card revenue for. So if you're interested, if you haven't heard about this yet, please talk to your office associate. We all had a training with the primary office associate with the fiscal responsibilities back in September. If you have any thoughts on a use case that you might want to use this for and want to have a conversation with me about it, let me know. Hopefully some of you were able to join on Debbie Lewis's training on Friday about integration with Qualtrics for, doing Qualtrics for like a meeting registration survey, and then that would automatically redirect our participants to NelNet to make the credit card payment. I think it looks really nice. It's very seamless. And just kind of helps us to have another mechanism for receiving revenue, especially during this time when we're not doing a lot of in-person stuff and may still need to accept payments for some of the things that we're doing. I think it was good timing that all this kind of came to fruition with our work from home and telecommute stuff. So let me know if you have any questions about NelNet. Our operations newsletter, Vicki Snyder's been kind of taking this on over the last several months to put together a newsletter for finance for our operations team that goes out to all extension listserv, usually the third week of the month. So I think last week this went out October 22nd or something like that. So keep an eye out on the all extension listserv. We're always putting out kind of updates as we know them about different things. One of the most recent ones was people were having issues with some eStores orders and Staples. Well, we found out that the university really wants us to use Internet Explorer as the primary browser for Staples and not use Chrome and Firefox. And after some recent updates, Chrome and Firefox weren't working very friendly with eStores. So things like that. As we have any information to share, we kind of try to collect that and put it out as a newsletter. You can also find all those past news articles and search through them on our operations website under the news tab. A couple of the recent highlights. I have seen more OSP activity or people trying to reallocate Pcard charges to OSP chart fields over the last couple of months. You just be aware that we cannot do that directly. We have to do an expense transfer process with a lot of extra hoops to jump through. So best practice is just to not use our Univ Pcards for OSP purchases. But if you have to, we can eventually get that transaction posted to the project, but it does take a lot of extra steps. Catch up on your e-reports reconciliation before year end. Make sure you've got those things at least downloaded to your computer. So in case there are any issues with getting into e-reports in January, we've at least got the past data available. But also, it's a good time to try to catch up on that monthly reconciliation that we might have gotten behind on over the summer and fall months with everything else going on. Remember to get IT services approval for any software, IT equipment related purchase. I guess they don't call it approval, they call it review, but IT services needs to review those requests before they're done. So if you want to buy something on a Pcard, a lot of times I see this with software license renewals that may happen automatically on the Pcard. So that does have to happen on a yearly basis. We can't get the approval from last year and keep that rolling over from year to year. So anytime that we're doing software IT related stuff, please submit a ticket for those things, and Kaylee Bizarre will help you with that. And also any expense that we're posting, whether it be a Pcard purchase, an e-request, anything like that, be sure you're using the 6 series account numbers and not 4 series account numbers or any other starting digit. I think sometimes we go into e-request and not sure what account number we want to use. So we do a search and we see one that looks like it's going to fit well. Well, it may end up being like a revenue account instead of an expense account. So if those hit revenue accounts, we have to go back and do journal entries to correct those. So just make sure we're using those 6 series expense accounts. And with that, 2 minutes left for some questions. I will gladly hang on for a couple minutes if anybody's got something else you want to talk about. But if not, thank you so much for spending this hour with me this morning. Hopefully we all learned something a little bit new today. And as always, if you have any questions, let myself or Sarah, Vicki, and Patty on our ops fiscal team know. We'll be happy to help.
Thanks, Jesse.
Well, thank you, everyone. We appreciate you being here. Thanks again for joining us today, and we will see you in the next session.
Thank you.